And tonight, knock on wood, we'll start with Donna Komar, the esteemed Webster Town Assessor, with a presentation and a Q&A by the board of a process that has been done in the last month or so. And then, depending on how things go, we have a resolution at the 7:30 board meeting that would basically be taking the recommended revaluation firm and getting into contract before December 31st this year, because Mr. Adams, our finance director, says then we can use ARPA money for it. So that's a long preface, huh? But without further ado, I'm going to hand the baton to Donna Komar.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I also want to say that I am the spokesperson then for our 7-member committee, and the members were Supervisor Tom Clarity, Town Council Member Jennifer Wright, myself as Assessor, Marisol Montalvo, Assistant Assessor, Bridget Harvey, Communications Director, Paul Adams, our Finance Director, and Kim Doyle, the Assistant to the Supervisor. Also, I would be the department head supervising this project. So to begin, kind of to recap a little bit, our charge from the November 7th, 2024 discussion was for this project to be considered for funding for the ARPA funds, as Supervisor Clarity just said, and that they need to be under contract by December 31st of 2024 and spent by December 31st of 2026. Our charge was to solicit quotes for professional services based on a standardized outline that was our own creation, so that we could easily compare the quotes that we would be receiving, because the time is so tight and the turnaround was very aggressive in a nice way. Our charge was to interview and compare the interested evaluation firms' presentations, their contracts, their experience, and really vet out and see what we could find out about the services that they offer, and return here today with a recommendation based upon our findings. Now, this was a very aggressive tall order for any business during the holiday season. It was November 7th when you sent me out. I'm coming back on December 19th. So I think at this point it is very fitting for me to give many thanks to the firms that participated, and especially for their very quick response. Our committee had several questions. We went back to them a couple of different times, and this report would not be complete today if they had not made this quote a priority on their end. So my thanks to the firms. And also I wanted to point out that this report is not about the project itself. Tonight's topic is about presenting these quotes that have been obtained and to recommend a firm. The project itself and its details will be shaped by that selection, and therefore that would have to be a future presentation. We're not prepared to get into those weeds tonight. This is just really step one in formatting the plan that we may carry out. So, in assessor lingo, I've been telling you that this is for the 2027 assessment role. What does that mean? From today forward, basically what that means is it's a 30-month project timeline with 3 key things. It would be the first 12 months, as in sort of beginning now, if you can put now in quotes, right? Starting as soon as the calendar turns, and it would be convenient to all parties. We would begin a 12-month public education program. And I want to stress education because there's a lot to learn. We're fully aware that there are people who have purchased homes in the town of Webster and have never seen a revaluation. So I think that it is very, very prudent that we educate our public. They're not accustomed to revaluation projects that come up cyclically in other municipalities. So to take the advantage of this 12-month before we would actually engage the firm into the part of the business that they would take up the baton and go forward on, that's the second part, 18-month engagement. And that would run from the beginning of January through the completion of the project, which would be for the final assessment roll in the year of 2027. And that's what I mean when I say the 2027 assessment roll. We would do the public education in the first 12 months. Of course, we would have their support, and as Supervisor Clarity liked to say, we don't do that without. We now have many participants, and we would make sure that all of us were on the same page. results from this project then would be reflected on the tax bills for September for your school bill in 2027 and the January town and county bill of 2028. And if you live in the village, it would also encompass the June village bill of 2028. No bills prior to those 3 dates would be affected by this project, and I think that's important because the calendar year and the assessment bill year don't line up, and sometimes that's a detail that's missed by the public. An overview of the engagement period, which I said would be the January 2026 through July of 2027, generally breaks down into 3 key phases. Of course, we want to begin with the public education, so that's a separate box outside of the phases that we've identified. There are 3 main phases. They typically overlap, but yet they are distinct in their processing. And the completion date would be, as I said, July 1st for the 2027 final assessment board. Starting now does allow us to have that additional time for the public education campaign, meet with residents, have them ask their questions, have us explain as much as we could possibly explain so that there are no surprises. We do not want any surprises. 3 firms in Western New York were invited to provide quotes. 2 of them replied. So this is a PDF, and I'm trying to get this over to my houses. Gar Associates comes from Williamsville and Clifton Park, and KLW Municipal Inc. comes from Buffalo, New York. There's a third that, if I quote them, they said, unfortunately, due to other project commitments, we are not in a position to be able to bid on the project at this time. So we did have 3 very qualified firms. Both of the firms that did reply boast that all of their completed projects have been accepted by the Office of Real Property Tax Services, which is the agency underneath the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance that oversees the assessment projects. And both of them have said that all of their projects have been completed at 100% equalization rate and have been accepted by that agency. They have decades of experience in completing such projects. They both employ state-certified appraisers on staff, and they have a broad range of experience, and they boast that they have courteous and professionally trained staff specializing in this industry. I think it's noteworthy to know that while we only got 2 quotes, there aren't really tons of companies that even do this, and we were looking for those that were closest by and experience here in Monroe County. Both firms will promote partnership with the town via communication and timeliness of the project. Both of them requested the exact same set of data, which makes sense to me, so they were both on the same wavelength and knowing exactly what it was that they would need to ask in order to quote the project. And both of them would be able to begin the execution of the project to maximize the time that could be invested by getting a really thorough time and attention to the project. They've asked, can we have your property record cards early since we've got this extra lead time while you're doing that PR campaign? So both of them, I feel, would be qualified to do a complete quality project in a very professional manner, and you would be satisfied with either one. So the quotes. The quotes came in very different one from the other. I'm just going to let you reflect on this for a moment and digest that. Gar Associates quoted $65 a parcel roughly. How many parcels there are in the town, which is sometimes a point of reference for assessors to say, hey, what's your revamp project cost? $65 a parcel is typically a price that you would find when you were doing a complete data collection. So their total is $1,100,000. KLW's quote is $411,500. That's about $25 a parcel. Both firms are very well aware that we have good data in Webster. We have taken the last 20 years to make sure that we collect the building permits. When people question what we have on file for their property, we're very happy to go and review it and to update our data so that our data is good. Line by line, these are the categories that we have laid out for them to quote. This is that the highlighted portions, the parts in bold, are where there's a very distinct difference. It is also noteworthy that once completed, maintaining this project is significantly less costly in future years. In addition to the 1.1 million or the 411,500 quote, down below you will see the additional costs, which are typical additional costs for any project. There are going to be specialty properties that will not fit the mass appraisal approach, and so there is an additional cost associated with each of those properties, and I've identified 8 to 10 of them so far, just to give you an idea. Some are more complicated than others. Think Xerox and Fairlife. Those would be our most complicated properties. But there are also a few other properties that just wouldn't lend themselves well at all to a computer-assisted mass appraisal format. And they would give us an additional price on that. So that's above and beyond the price at the top of the card. So after having considered this, asking questions and follow-up questions, our recommendation is to move forward with a plan to complete a townwide 2027 revaluation using KLW Municipal Incorporated. And I want to thank the committee members for their thoughtfulness and their time and attention and freeing their schedules. I'm going to turn this around in a timely fashion, and I'm happy to take any of your comments or questions at this time.
Back up 2 slides, please.
Sure.
It's just the stark difference in the data verification and collection between these 2 companies and the evaluation process.
Yes.
It's stunning.
If I go back a few more slides, in this 3-phase part, phase 1, the data analysis, and phase 2, the valuation production. Those are those fields that you see down here in the quotes that are in bold. And that is where the majority of the labor on their part comes in.
John?
You clearly have done a great job, Betty, and I appreciate it. It's just, I see these numbers, and you did a great job comparing side by side. It's,
And Jennifer, since you were at the table as liaison, having done these comparisons and committee bids and looking at who over the last 5 years, this one was very unique because when we saw the delta of $700,000, the thing that came to us was, and I know it came to me, like, what are we missing? Because that's just something, what is going on? And it caused us, well, we went out and asked a lot of questions of these 2 firms, like there's got to be something missing here. But Donna's quote to them was pretty simple, pretty consistent.
right?
And so then we went out and we were like, okay, we went out to other towns and said, well, okay, you did a reval then and this, and how did this you? That delta caused us, like, come on, man, there's got to be something wrong. But at the end of the day, Donna, and I think you described it best, was that, and with no disparaging toward Gar, you have a very big outfit that has a lot of overhead, and you have a more small boutique firm that can get this done, and you'll be dealing with just 1, 2, or 3 people. Is that about what it is?
It is, yes, and I think boutique is a good word for it. Trying to think how I was going to say this. What Bob Kazarek would bring to the table is a small town feel. He's a smaller firm. When he does his PR, it's in person. When Gar Associates does it, they're very modern and they're very web-based, and there's a lot of bells and whistles that they would bring. And I think at the end of the day, what we decided was he has a very personal touch, and we were interviewing the person who would be doing the work instead of someone who was presenting a presentation, who brought, names of, people in the company and that. And again, I know both of these firms well for other reasons, and I have great respect for both of them. I just think that KLW is the better fit for us because he will be at our senior citizen centers. He will be in our schools. He will be asking to meet people face to face. And he will not be sending you to a website that says, fill in your paperwork and we'll review it. I'm oversimplifying that, and that is not exactly how VAR does it. I want you to give you the impression that that's how VAR does it. But modern view, and then kind of an old-fashioned hometown person. Would you agree?
I would agree. I would agree, and their presentations were very different in that regard, and those styles were reflected in what you shared with the committee. And I do think a big piece of this is the public relations piece being face-to-face, given we haven't done a reval in 20 years or over 20 years. That is probably one of the most important aspects of a revaluation, is to be engaging with the community and explaining what it means and what impact is it going to have on you, and in allowing to ask questions and doing that with, I think, the videos and the podcasts and those other means of communicating are good, and they provide the same information, but it's one way. The other things that firm provided was an 800 number, so when the revaluation letters go out, they would take the calls, and Bridget had a lot of questions about that, because those calls now are going to a 1-800 center, and there wouldn't be that data coming back to us of how many people are calling, who are calling, what's the nature of their concerns, and that is something that we would want to have that information and be, I guess, more in control of that, or having Bridget have that information. And one of the big things I think, Tom, that you brought to the board is when you have community interactions, you are amassing information, and so we know who's out there, what their concerns are, and leveraging that to have the digital newsletter, and it's just going to be a way to collect more of that information. So overall, I mean, if you look at the price, and I think KLW has the experience and the ability to do this, and being fiscally responsible for something like this, especially given it's really a net sum zero game that gets just every property up to 100% of the market value. We have to take that, put the fiscally responsible hat on as part of this process as well.
I have complete confidence in the committee, and certainly Donna in your recommendations as well. I will agree with Councilman Cahill that the discrepancy between the two quotes is astounding. It's where you wish you had the third, so you could see which one really wasn't lining up. But I will also certainly say that I don't think that we need to pay for bells and whistles. We want a good product at the end of the day, and one that all of our residents truly understand. And as I said, I have complete confidence in the recommendation.
I want to add one other thing about our data, and Donna was talking about that. Donna and her team have amazing data, and part of that is kind of feeding into these prices as well. If you look at towns even in Monroe County that do reassessments on a more regular basis, you will see once they get to 100%, in the following years, they tend to go down at a more rapid rate than they do in Webster. So even though we haven't done the reevaluation in 20 years, our values, because of the work that Donna's team does in going out in the community and updating the properties with permits, et cetera, make our data better going into this whole process to start with. And that's a testament to you and your team. So thank you for that.
Well, the PR campaign is going to be instrumental in this venture for sure. And I think people will be, I don't want to use the word shocked, but I know that house prices have gone significantly higher in the last few years. So the more frequently we can educate residents, I think that's going to be important. And just because your house is reassessed at a higher value does not necessarily mean that you would be paying more in taxes. And I think that is something that will need to be explained to people over and over and over again. Because I know there's certain areas in the county where people they'll have their reassessment done, and they'll be told, oh, look, we lowered your tax rate, but you're paying more in taxes. So that's where people tend to get a little bit skeptical when it comes to revales. So again, just to reiterate, the PR campaign is going to be so important, so important, because you can have all the meetings and people will still say, I didn't know this was happening. And how many times have we heard it?
That, it's funny, ARPA kind of drove the bus saying, hey, should we look at this now, and is there a way to get into contract at the end of 24 and meet the ARPA requirements to use the money? But the best part about this is the firm that started until January 26th, which gives us that whole year of 25. And it's funny, John, because talking to other supervisors and some of everybody's seen the news about revals in different towns, death threats, and just crazy, right? And some of the seriously, and I mean, some of the supervisors said, you're not going to be able to avoid it, this and that, and that's never been. Well, I'm just saying, that's never been an acceptable answer. When you're like, you can't avoid it, whatever. I'm like, no. We can do our best job to avoid this. And I think about when John, when you say how many times we heard it, I've never heard about that. And I remember a gentleman that was at the podium about 6 months ago, during 5 minutes open to the public, and he said he hadn't heard about this thing. And Deputy Supervisor Cataldi is a lot more articulate than I am, Charlie, would that be the way to put it? And in a nice way, she said, it was in the Webster today, we emailed it out, it was here, it was there, it was there, it was there. The only thing we didn't do was go to your door and knock on it and say, we're here to talk about this. Other than that, the means or the mediums of communication, we exhausted them on that item 6 months ago. But the guy can take the podium and say, I didn't see it. I heard it over and over again. So I think about that, and I'm like, here's the reality. And Bridget Harvey is our Director of Communications. She's here tonight. We're discerning how do we do this public relations education in 25 and maximize it out. Whether that's going to be done all in-house, whether we would consider having a PR firm, we don't know. We aren't going to wait until December of 25. We will be on this in January of 25. And the way I see this is, and I think everybody knows, I'm not running for supervisor again. So I won't be here in 26 when the actual engagement starts. And I'd be very embarrassed and feel terrible if I left the new board, the new supervisor, and the new, there'll be at least one new board member with a headache for 26 and 27 on a revaluation when it hasn't been done in 20 years.
That is certainly not our intent.
No, and in fact, that's why to me, like this is kind of my, I don't want to say vocation, I don't want to be sacrilege, but this is something I really am going to emphasize in 25, whether it's, I'm just thinking out loud, fireside chats, going out to neighbors, going to people's homes, all that. Putting 5 pages in the April Webster Today, and again in the July Webster Today, it goes out to all the houses and just pounding on this communication that shows what you already know, John, you and I know this. Our tax rate is $5 per thousand. My house assesses at $200,000. That means my tax bill for the town is $1,000. Does everybody do that math? 200,000, $5 per thousand. My town tax bill is $1,000. In a revaluation, my house would probably come up to $400,000 market value, and the tax rate would be $2.50 per thousand. We'll do the math. It's the same $1,000 tax bill. Now, that is basically the premise of this revaluation, but as we know, John,
That's the component
some
right there.
houses may during this find out that you've been underassessed for many years, and your taxes may go up. Some will find out that they were overassessed, and their taxes will come down, and then some will stay exactly the same. The tax levy from the town doesn't change. We're just splitting up the pie differently. And that's what I think makes people very nervous, that they're going to be in that third, that their taxes are going to go up. And I don't even know if it's a third, Donna, because your data is so good, as Jennifer said. And other town assessors have corroborated, as have these bidders, saying that our data, when you go online, you can go and see what they say on your house, John, or Ginny's house, or any of our houses, and it's pretty spot on. Jennifer, we did that test, like on your house, and at least what it showed, it was spot on. I think.
Parents' house.
Right. Well,
Whatever.
where some of these revaluations start with no data, like you said, they have to go out and really create, is that a 2,000 square foot house? How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? Donna's staff over the years has done such a good job keeping that up to date. I think that's one of the reasons why. I mean, we all thought this was going to cost $1 million. And Gar corroborated that.
Yeah.
But,
And part of that, maybe possibly, was just in their response, because they didn't have all the evaluations, and it was a very short period of time, they just responded with,
yeah. And that's in your world, John. I mean, sometimes, like, when you go and bid, you're like, you know what, we're busy with a one-arm paper hanger. We'll bid high.
Yes.
And if we get the job, especially when it's 12 months out,
Right.
they're like, we'll figure out how to do it. So the bid process is not science.
I did that years ago. There was a project I did not want to do,
Yeah.
and I doubled what I normally would have bid.
Did you get it?
There you go.
Well, I don't feel sorry.
So there's a few other
You made it
companies
work.
out there that didn't want to do it either, so.
I don't want to,
Yeah, that job.
I have to, I got to do my Paul Adams impression today. I got blessing from him on this, okay? He should be here to say this, because obviously if it came out of his mouth, the board would be like, I believe that. Come out of my mouth. But Paul said that the 3 firms and only 2 replying, giving a bid, does meet our procurement policy. We made the effort to get 3 firms. It's a specialization. There's not 1,000 firms that do this. He felt very good that it meets our procurement policy and is well approached. Here's a good problem, gang. Why don't you think about this? We assumed we were going to use $800,000 of uncontracted ARPA money, and it would pay for the majority of the reval. Well, guess what?
Right.
If we go with this recommendation, we still have about $390,000 left. And Paul, when he gets back, he said he would send out to us his recommendation. I mean, the plug is we just put it toward the highway garage because that's in contract. But he thinks he can take some other contracts, Webster, 600 Ridge, he might be able to say, we can use it for this, use it for that, all that. So he'll send something out to us before December 31st to, give that. The third thing, and I don't really, this will come really as we get into the contract negotiation, if the board does a resolution at 7:30 to authorize the supervisor to go with the recommended firm. We really have between tonight, the 19th, and the 31st to execute the contract. So Charlie, the last time we're still our town attorney, correct, sir? Right? No short time in this, right? But we do have a template contract from KLW, sorry, yeah, you know, I would get that over to you, and I would also have Kyle Taylor.
We have it now.
Yes,
I have
and
your
and I
This
already,
was a sample contract. They've been
Yeah.
well vetted by other municipalities.
We're meeting on Monday.
yeah.
Maybe you want
And you're gonna need Paul from table two, because, you know, where there's things that I want you and or Kyle to look at from a legal perspective, I didn't read the contract. I mean, it's premature, because if we don't vote on this tonight, then it's moot. But if we do it, I already told Donna that today, if we vote yes on it, then you get that template contract, for that example, over to Kyle and Charlie. And then Paul wants to make sure he's involved in that too, because technically, we have to pay out all the ARPA money by the end of '26. And Paul has asked a very good question during this. Well, if engagement is January of '26 through July of '27, how do we do that? It's a good question. And he's got to work with either the federal treasury about, you know, can you prepay it all through December 31st? And have it, it's an accounting whatever. Or does he have latitude on that where he can make adjustments in '26? I don't know. That's where I'm not going to speak for Paul. The way he explained it, it made sense, but I'd be better in
to.
explaining.
I've got a question, Mr. Supervisor. What about, you talked about the possible, let's say, direction of
Mhm.
Are you able to,
Yeah, because I don't think it's a resolution per se, because we did, think about it this way, when we filed in April 30th of last year, we said our intention was, which the federal government says you're not married to this, was $800,000 and 170 for, remember that, we had 5 or 6 different categories. And then as the year went on, certain things, and Paul would be better to explain this. We could sit here and say without a resolution, you know what, we didn't have another contract, so we're just popping it onto the highway garage, because we're in contract. And that money, let's just call it what it is, $390,000 if it goes to the highway garage, which we're contracted, and it would be $390,000 less that we have to go into bonding, 30-year bond on the project. It's as simple as that. So no, I'm not, I don't think, and you'll talk to Paul about it, the way he explained it, I just, you know, I don't think there's any, he has some contracts already that are inked, that would, obviously we've been involved in, because contracts won't get inked here unless we come to the board and authorize the supervisor to sign them. So he's got an idea on some of them where you could, you know, kind of backfill the ARPA money. It's all legit, it's just, you know, like I said, we thought it was going to be $1 million. We'll use the $800,000 for it, and then figure out next year when we do the addition of $200,000. Is it the budget year of 25 and 26? We go for a grant, and lo and behold, it looks like it's $400,000. It's a good problem.
Great.
I love problems like this. So, devil's in the details.